Well, holy shit. I actually managed to do it. After procrastinating for ages, I finally managed to produce an audiobook version of the Lunatic Fringe book. It's currently available on all Amazon sites, audible.com, and shortly on iTunes. And if you're the page-turning type, it's also, of course, still available in Kindle form, paperback, and hardback on Amazon. 10 hours and 10 years worth of Blue Skies Magazine's articles, all available to you right fucking now, including a few author's notes and even an apology or two. Enjoy.
In a world.
Mate, hold up. We said we're done with the serious intros.
Who said?
Well, we did.
I don't remember that.
Well, I said it, and you're me, so, you know.
Well, I don't care. In a world.
Hey, I told you. We're keeping it light.
You do it on your own then.
Well, technically, I already am. So, anyway. Fuck yeah. Pure wild flight. Get it down ya. How good? Visit nzaerosports.com.
I get to do the next one.
Well, obviously, you moron. We both do.
Of course, I absolutely love the NZ Aerosports business model. I mean, come on. One glance at an Icarus fuck yeah sticker and you know it lines up perfectly with the fucking pilot mentality. But outside their wonderful use of colorful language and a great company vibe, there's a long list of reasons to say NZ Aerosports fuck yeah. NZ Aerosports blows me away right out of the gate as a canopy manufacturer with a bold offer. They give you 10 jumps on your brand new nylon to decide if you want to keep it, swap it out, or even return it for a refund. I mean, seriously, how incredible is that? That's like getting halfway through a prom and deciding you prefer the slightly racier date that goes down faster. Seriously, they do that. If you're not madly in love with your new canopy after 10 jumps, they'll let you swap it out for another size or model, or even get your money back. And the range of canopies they've got? Man, they've got a style canopy to fit every jumper and every situation with models you know and trust, like the Sapphire 3, the perfect choice for the beginner or intermediate canopy pilot. The Crossfire 3, when you're ready to kick it up that elliptical notch. The JFX 2, if you're looking to up your new swoop game. The Leia as the workhorse and dirt water dirt beast. Or the Petra. The Petra cranks out crazy power and is nothing short of a record breaker. But hey, it's not always about speed either. Take the Kraken. Built as a low pack volume canopy specifically with wingsuiting in mind, she gives you all the performance you're looking for with the reliability you need that'll have you itching for that next formation, rodeo, or puffy cloud. So the equipment is top of the line kick-ass stuff as you already know, but how about the team? Well, the customer service gang is there to sort you out whenever you need them. Maddie and Beto are always there to help with Jen holding the reins. They're available for you at sales@nzaerosports.com, and they've got a kick-ass live chat tool on the website if you're wanting to hit someone up right away. These are the crew you're going to want to talk to get those custom orders in. With the stock nylon, once you know what you want, they'll have that shit on a FedEx truck as soon as the credit card machine says approved and get you in the air in no time. For your custom orders, you'll be able to get a time frame for building and shipping when you design it, so get to it. And demos. They've got demos in the US available from their partner Rock Sky Market. The whole US demo fleet is there with Sapphire 3, Crossfire 3, Kraken, JFX2, and Leia canopies in a range of sizes. They also offer student and tandem demos in the US. Bottom line, every step of the way, NZ Aerosports is there to get you what you need, and I personally couldn't be happier to be teamed up with them here on Lunatic Fringe. And now, time to get started with Lunatic Fringe Into the Void, brought to you proudly by NZ Aerosports. Fuck yeah.
Coming straight from the cockpit, it's another episode of Lunatic Fringe with the fucking pilot.
Ready, set, go! Back in the can for another edition of Lunatic Fringe Into the Void, and looking at another face that I've seen in magazines and once in a while in person for many, many years now. So please tell me, who the fuck are you and what do you do?
Good morning. My name is Shannon Pilcher. I'm a career skydiver, to be honest with you, and it's So I've retired for the last 3 years, but it's still a big part of my life, and I'm sure we'll get into that. I currently coach leaders and their leadership teams.
Wow.
So I've jumped tracks, but I'm doing a lot of the same stuff in a different context.
I was going to say, my very first thought when you say that is that very much lines up with the lifestyle of a professional skydiver and someone that spent his years teaching people, especially in high stress and very difficult situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny to hear you say that. Teaching people is exactly not coaching. And
Right.
so, and this I'm saying to you what's in my face as I've become a trained, educated leadership coach is, there's an organization called the International Coaching Federation, the ICF, and they are large. I mean, they are undisputably the governing body of executive coaching around the world. And one of the things you quickly learn is that giving advice and teaching and mentoring, all of these realms are not part of coaching.
Okay.
Coaching is specifically about listening, about prodding, about provoking, challenging, and helping people move forward and think forward, but trusting that they have the answers inside. They know themselves better than we ever could, right? So
Sure.
yeah, so it's funny, I've been a coach in skydiving for 30 years, and I think back about my behavior and my ways of working, and I've been a mentor, I've been a teacher, I've been a guide, and of course I've learned how to coach along the way. But all the people I know, friends, including me, who we call ourselves coaches, we're passing on our expertise, and that is technically not coaching.
All right.
Yeah,
I mean, no, I completely get what you're saying, for sure.
Yeah,
and I suppose that definitely is kind of part of the mentality that we have, especially in something along the lines of skydiving. Coaching ratings happen so early now in the sport, and that is kind of what you're taught, is that this is what you're supposed to do as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny. I've been able to, over the years, talk to so many skydivers that for lack of a better word, I looked up to and admired the things that they were doing over the years. And it's always so strange and cool to realize that the people that I looked up to or had hero worship are like my age. These are people that, it's not the previous generation that I'm looking up to. I mean, you and I are of similar age, but the stuff that you, and especially you and your teammates, were able to do over the years were the things that people like me really did look up to. So I want to get into how you got started in skydiving and how you kind of ended up with such a rarefied air in the sport.
Yeah. No, I hear you, man. It's funny. I will answer your question, but it triggers my thoughts, and hope you're enjoying that wine. It's 9 a.m. here. I could use a glass of wine or another cup of coffee.
Right.
No, it's just what you said. Like it's dawned on me constantly, because is that with all the accolades and awards and accomplishments, and this isn't a feigned humility when I say this, but when you're in your own space and you're just kind of reflecting, you're thinking about things. I can't think of anything that I've ever done on my own. You know what I mean? Like and then largely when I think about all these different things that we have accomplished, the various teams and that I've been a part of, I'm like, man, I don't really know if I contributed very much to that accomplishment. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
So I'm really not trying to sound humble. Like I know that I'm good at what I do, and I know that I contribute, but maybe one of the beauties of being on effective teams is that, and you're all pulling your weight and you're all helping each other and supporting each other and all these things, is that when the dust settles, you can each feel like you didn't really do a whole lot. You're all pulling together to make something happen. So,
but I mean, that's kind of the definition of a good team, though, right?
Yeah,
I mean, a team shouldn't have a superstar and a bunch of followers. It should be everybody doing their bit.
Yeah. So probably that's, the way it started for me. Dean is the. Do you go by Dean?
What's that? Yeah, Dean.
Yeah, I don't know. Do people use your first name to call you by Dean? Is that a common way to be?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you had a nickname that I was unaware of.
Oh, well, they call me Princess, so I prefer Dean.
I saw that. Yeah. We'll come back to that. I'd like to hear about it.
Yeah.
I mean, when I got started, we were in Georgia Tech. Ian Bobo and I were in Georgia Tech, and I don't want to drag everybody through the history, but we were college students who landed. They had a skydiving club at Georgia Tech, and we didn't know what we didn't know, man. We just tried it out and we loved it. And at 26 jumps, Ian had been jumping for a couple of years, and at 26 jumps, him and two others needed a fourth to start a four-way FS team. And that was part of the pressure they were putting on me is, hey, come jump. And little did I know they wanted to plug the slot, you know. So literally on my 26th jump with Tivas and a belly mount pilot chute and a big analog altimeter in my face, frat hat, goggles, all that. Was my first four-way team training jump with 26 jumps. And I just don't know that I think that rarely happens for people. And we began through college. It was an obsession. And we had Jack Jeffrey, we had airspeed posters on our walls, or it was a different team name at the time. And we had heroes, and we wanted to win the world championships of four-way. We had sponsorship proposals for Coca-Cola and IBM and all these companies. It was just ridiculous, right? It was out to the moon. And that just began it all. And to this day, some of those teammates are still my teammates. Ian Bobo is my teammate and business partner through everything for 32 years, So
I mean, it was a different time in skydiving for sure, right? Because and correct me if I'm wrong, but opportunities seem to come so much faster and earlier 25 or 30 years ago. I mean, I started 28 years ago and was shooting tandem videos before I had 100 skydives. That doesn't happen now. It doesn't even come close.
Yes. Yeah. We've almost become more of just as a collective, as an entire sport and a community, we've evolved very quickly, right? Is what you're alluding to. So
sure.
So the quality control and the procedures and all the equipment. Look at the equipment, right? Like equipment now is just so reliable and so functional and reliable that I mean, I didn't have a malfunction until I had like 6,300 jumps.
Oh my God.
I mean, my fear was, can I handle a malfunction? Like, can I really do it if it happens? That was my kind of an anxiety, an undercurrent of an anxiety that I had at all times,
Oh, sure. Well, one of the stories that I have told many times is I had my first cutaway at 27 jumps. And of course, that's pretty intense at that such a low jump number. But a much more experienced skydiver came up to me, and I want to say he had 3,000 or 4,000 jumps at the time. And he smiled and patted me on the back. And he said, at 27 jumps, you know more about this sport than I do, because you can pull the handles. And that stuck with me. And I'd imagine nowadays that goes a long way, because there's a whole bunch of jumpers that can go for huge periods of time without ever having to think about it.
Totally. And they may not even think about what I was describing. That for many, they might even be an awareness that, oh shit, I don't know if I'll handle this properly. Because it's just all working so well. It's easy to go to just think it's always going to work,
Sure. Well, now obviously that cutaway at 6,300 went well, because you're sitting here talking to me. Yeah. Was it when it finally happened? Was it just oh shit, here we go?
Yeah, I think it was a slow speed malfunction, so it was even easier, right? It was like got open good, I'm flying, but there's a line broke, and so I had time to think about it, fly to where I wanted to go, decide how high I wanted to cut away. I mean, that's not a high speed malfunction is a much different scenario. So I still had to wait longer. I don't recall how long before I actually had something that stoked the heart rate and made me think fast.
Sure. Now stepping back to you getting into competition so early on, but you were talking about proper huge sponsorship being potentially thrown your guys' way at a time when skydiving was still considered a high risk, crazy sport. How did stuff like that come about?
Yeah, hey, I'm writing a book, by the way. So no, I mean, like a lot of these things, it's funny, they're fresh on my mind because they've been laid into the pages.
Awesome.
But yeah, it helps me very, very quickly speak about it. But I think we kind of prided ourselves. I know we did. We came to the land in 96, two of us, Kyle and myself. Ian and Dave, the other two, followed a year later. And DeLand, being the mecca that it was at the time, the manufacturing hub, the industry hub, and still to a large extent, had a beautiful drop zone here. And we came and got jobs in the industry. Kyle at Relative Workshop, which is now UPT. I went to Skydiving Magazine, the newspaper magazine,
Sure.
for a few decades. And we were really, we started seeking sponsorship, and we quickly found that there was no formality to sponsorship. It was doing favors for friends, is what it kind of the headline of what sponsorship was, and we, of course, we're gonna chase that and try to get the favors pointed our way. But we also, I think, we take a little pride in helping to shift the paradigm towards the manufacturers starting to hold athletes a little more accountable, starting to have contracts and agreements between the athletes and things like that. And nowadays, I don't know how familiar you are with the sponsorship programs at some of these manufacturers, but now they're full-on programs with different tiers for different level of athletes. It's really as it should be, because
Sure.
a lot of manufacturers will give discounts to certain athletes while they'll not only fully support, but they'll provide subsidy for other athletes. So there's a full range in place now that we didn't have.
Sure. Well, I mean, it kind of had to go that way, though, right? I mean,
yeah.
At a certain point, you've got to take care of the people that are producing. And I remember one of the big things that now UPT would do would be to sponsor people that weren't necessarily athletes, but they were great advocates for their equipment. And they were out on the drop zone all the time, whether it be coaches or instructors that loved the gear and would help to further the brand, which I thought was a great idea as well. But those aren't athletes, you also have to get the guys that are standing on the podium time after time. And let's face it, it's a risky sport, especially when it comes to what you ended up getting into. Yeah, man. I mean, you're talking the highest risk in the sport that deserves some proper recognition, both in equipment and financially.
Yeah. And we were lucky. So Ian and I, there's a company, you've probably heard of them, called Flight Concepts.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They're based in Atlanta. Red Payne is the owner. He's still, I think, knocking away at it, at the work, And Chris Gay was part of Flight Concepts at the time. Chris Gay also went to Georgia Tech, where Ian and Kyle and I went. So in college, here we are. We start skydiving. We don't know what we're doing. We're really tuned into this four-way stuff. Flight Concepts sponsored us right out of the gates. So I've never had to buy gear since I started. I know it's quite laughable, and it's in some ways I'm almost embarrassed. It's like, really, you had it that easy, I bought a rig. I bought a Javelin, was my first and only purchase, and then soon after Sunpath supported us. But what were we talking about? Oh, just the athletes that. I forgot what you mentioned.
The athletes and sponsorship, and basically just how you worked your way into it, and then you got picked up by Flight Concepts very early on.
Yeah, so it just segued perfectly. When we all moved to DeLand and went to work, Ian Bobo went to work at PD as an industrial engineer, helping with them with their logistics and stuff. And that naturally brought us over from Flight Concepts to PD. So we just transitioned almost seamlessly, almost without having to ask for it, because they were there to support. And then it's really cool. I'd like to share this publicly, but we set up at the time, remember, as you're describing, their sponsorship was new and it was just uncharted waters. And we set up what we called the power triangle in DeLand. So I worked at Skydiving Magazine. Mike Truffer, he's an amazing influencer and amazing thinker. He helped us set up a sponsorship relationship between Skydive DeLand, UPT, PD, and DeLand, and they all traded services on our behalf. So they they gave us rigs, canopies, jumps, all for free, but then they gave each other advertisements and gear, and they provided DeLand with tandem rigs, all this stuff. And it was just this beautiful symbiosis that allowed us as a very young team to start start training hard, and that's why we quickly started doing well.
Well, that's one of the coolest things about the community in general, though, right? Is, I mean, it's still a very small community. It's dramatically bigger than it used to be, and there's companies popping up all the time, and new wing designers and new container designers and all that, but it's still a small community. And a lot can be done without money being exchanged to further the careers of other people.
Yes.
It's funny because you're a PD guy. This podcast is sponsored by NZ Aerosports. There's no animosity between the two companies, though. It's just a great rivalry. And that's one of the coolest things, too, is I actually had somebody ask me, well, are you concerned about bringing a PD athlete on? Why? Are you kidding? They love each other. It's fantastic. If it weren't for that competition, then, I mean, there's no PR for anybody.
Yeah, totally. It's all a big, I mean, this is the wrong word because it has bad connotations, but I think we've all used it. We're like a big incest pool, like, I mean, the whole community, it's all so small. Like, I mean, CPS is Sunpath, UPT, and PD, and they're in the same family, and they're total competitors in the mainstream sport.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, in all aspects, I mean, it's 1 degree of separation in skydiving. If I don't know you, I know a dozen people that do. That's the primary reason why this podcast is done as well as it does, because if I don't know you and I want to approach you for the show, I can list a dozen people that do know you that will give you the elbow and go, hey, talk to this guy.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I hadn't listened to your show, and I had Craig and Eliana were here a few weeks ago. They stayed with us for a whole week, and knowing that you and I had been trying to get a show lined up, I had looked through some of your guests, and I saw Craig and I saw Jay. And Craig was here, so I asked him about it. He said that he gave me all kind of good juju, good vibes about doing it. So he should thank Craig and his team. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I use Craig's show as a bragging point to so many people because it was relatively new in the podcast. I want to say his episode was maybe the 5th or 6th guest that I had. And this is when my studio was in my spare toilet in my apartment in Dubai. And I brag that I got the Craig Girard to sit in a toilet and drink and talk skydiving with me for hours.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing, and it's only a sport like that. I got Reagan Tetlow and all these amazing people to come sit in a toilet with me and talk about skydiving.
Awesome.
So
Nice.
you find a relatively easy line into the sport, but when you were in Georgia Tech, what were you studying? Like, what were you going to be? Because this was not part of the plan.
Yeah, no, it's an engineering college, and I had always wanted to be an architect, so I enrolled to be an architect. I did it for a year, but during that year, I discovered I was more attracted to the construction, like the field work, the actual engineering of these giant buildings and all the logistics that go into it. So I went to work during school for a couple of years, and then out of school, the same company for a few years. So I worked for 3 or 4 years as an up and coming general contractor. I was a project engineer on a job site, and man, like that company now, they were really small. It was 3 partners and me and some superintendents. And like that company is massive now. They're called New South Construction Company. They're based in Atlanta, but I would be sitting pretty if I had stayed with them, from a financial perspective and everything else. But I'm more grateful for the experience. I don't look at it in any way I believe very much in regrets, by the way. I think regrets are something we like to pretend we don't have. But if you look up the definition of regret, it's like things you wish you had done differently.
Sure.
Or things you could have done differently. And I mean, I have regrets constantly. Like, well, I could have done this differently. I could have done that differently.
Sure.
It doesn't mean the connotation of like you're just wallowing in despair because of it. That's what it seems like, right? I know I have no regrets. I don't think that's the case, but I have a lot of gratitude for that experience. It really opened a lot of doors for me and gave me a lot of skills that I now use. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I tell you what, I completely line up with you on the whole regrets are a real thing. And anyone that gives you the whole no regrets thing is a bit diluted.
Yeah.
I'm 20, almost 29 years in the sport, and every morning I try and get out of bed. There's a couple of regrets that I got to stretch out. So there absolutely are regrets, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad things. They're learning experiences, but I wouldn't, the majority of my life, I wouldn't change for anything. And if money is your driving factor, then skydiving is not your sport.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so that's all I was painting is, if I had stayed with him, it would have been a completely different path, and
Sure,
I might have had a bigger house or something. The life, yeah. I live in constant awareness, a deep awareness of. I'm trying to find the right word, because to say the privilege and the blessings that I live in, and that I think a lot of us do, it just can't. It's hard to compare. There's just so many people running the rat race and really, really not fulfilled, not excited when they wake up. I wake up in pain too, man. I feel you. And that doesn't at all dull the eager anticipation I have about each and every day. I mean,
absolutely.
It's rare that I wake up not looking forward to the day.
Oh, yeah.
To me, that's a barometer. Like that's actually kind of the gauge I use for myself, is that if more than one or two mornings like that occur where I'm not feeling that way, then I've got to step back and think a little bit, because that's not the design that I want. So,
well, I'll tell you, I've always, ever since I started skydiving and it became the focal point of my life, whether it be jumping or flying, I've always felt like I got away with something, if that makes sense. I always felt like I watched these people doing the 9 to 5s, or more like 8 to 7s nowadays, and just working the living shit out of themselves so that they can drive their really nice car in heavy traffic to go home to do it all over again. It's not that I felt smarter than them. It's just that I felt like I found a path that they completely missed out on. And I've always just felt lucky. And you would know just as well as I, the opportunities that we've been given in the sport, whether it be just per jump or the travel around the world and the people that we've met. I mean, I see a picture of, I assume that's Nepal behind you. It looks like Amadablam.
That's Amadablam,
yeah. So, I mean, I've trekked to Everest twice and been on the ground for the Everest skydive expeditions, and just sat there shaking my head going, who the hell gets to experience this? Who am I that I get to experience something like this?
Yeah. Totally. I live in that awareness every day, and I have a brother, a younger brother. He's 4 years younger. I'm going to say it, and doesn't matter who hears it, but he's a heroin addict in the streets of Atlanta, homeless for 5 years. He's abandoned his family, his wife and two boys who became teenagers with him gone. Like really tragic. And it's not. Every parent loves their children. I mean, deeply. And so it's not that, it's the power of drugs, of those kind of drugs that can really consume you, And the reason I even mentioned that there, and I'm not trying to take us in that rabbit hole, but that combined with, just seeing, like you described, so many people kind of trapped in the rat race and all these other factors. My dad died when I just graduated college. It all influences that deep desire to take advantage of every second of every day. And
absolutely.
And the gratefulness for the luckiness that I have. I love the word luck. I used to not use that word, but that really does describe, there's a healthy dose of luck in all of this,
Oh yeah.
But when things land right for you, you also have to be in the right place and have prepared yourself the right way, So like a lot of the big lucky opportunities I wouldn't have had them had I not prepared myself in various ways. So it's a combination, right, of factors.
Sure. Well, I think luck can get you a lot of opportunities, but you've got to have the drive and the ability to take advantage of that luck. Same with me. And to your point with your brother and such, I've had two guests on it recently, actually, Jay Maletsky and another friend of mine, who were brought to skydiving through just a lack of desire to live anymore. They were just done with it. And that one jump literally 180'd the trajectory of their lives. So it's amazing what those little things can do. And it's so sad when you see people that kind of miss that 180, that opportunity to take a turn in another direction. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So back on the skydiving, I want to talk about you all of a sudden you literally walk into a sport and just walk into sponsorship and you're already at it doing these amazing things. But the Shannon Pilcher that I grew up with, and that must sound strange to you. The Shannon Pilcher that I grew up with was just a canopy master, along with names like Heath Richardson, who was like the god of nylon at the time.
Yoda.
Yeah, man. I mean, he could do no wrong. I never saw him not do anything flawlessly under canopy. How did that come about?
I mean, I don't know if you know this, Dean, but the PD Factory team was a four-way FS team to start.
I did not know that.
So in '99, that's back to that power triangle I described, and Ian working at PD. We went to PD, and we're training like 1,000 jumps a year, four-way in DeLand, very an intermediate team, and then we were trying to secure a spot. We did secure a sponsorship with PD, and then in 2001 was our last year as a Belly FS team. And Ian and I, we're still, I mean, because two of the guys left, they had other things to do in life. And Bobo and I were like, we don't want to see this go. And we had just gone to a swoop meet out in California when you said like the pro tour was starting to happen. And at that time they had two-way speed going through parallel lanes together. And Bobo and we had 10,000 jumps together. So we were tuned, man. We didn't have to think to fly together. And we went up against Heath and Jay, who had just met each other there in Paris for this event, and said, "Hey, let's partner up." And they were just so smooth and so good at what they did, and they won. They beat us. And I mean, I don't remember all how it went down, but Ian and I were just looking at each other like, we want these guys, and that helped to trigger our awareness. Like, PD makes parachutes. They're sponsoring a free fall team. Why don't we shift this to a canopy team? And talking with John and Bill at PD, they were all about it, right? Let's let the PD factory team be a representative of what we make, of what we build. So that's what we did. We invited Jay and Heath, and then overnight they became teammates, and the PD factory team took off.
Well, pretty much from day one, PD Factory team became like the team to beat. Everybody knew PD Factory. You knew the colors, you knew the canopies as soon as you looked up in the air, and you got to know the names very, very quickly. So it was, pretty much right away, you guys kind of set the standard for canopy piloting.
Yeah, it was just back to that timing thing, right? It's back to the right place, right time, kind of the luck that falls. And we were seizing, like Ian and I, and Jay and them were out there because we were all on the cusp of this new discipline that was taking shape. So all of us were pioneers in a way. All of us were innovators. And then so the forming of the PD Factory team was almost natural. It made sense to do this. We built the team. And so now, and the light is shining on all these people who are leading, who are ushering this new sport into being. And so I think that just made it easy, right? So like all the other sponsorships fell into place. The sponsors were watching it too, right? And they wanted to get on board. It's funny, like as I look at all the sponsors, like I've been really lucky also to be with kind of the same sponsors throughout, except for some small deviations. Like when we moved to DeLand, UPT wasn't ready to sponsor this rookie group who knew nothing and had no reputation or anything. But so Kyle worked at UPT, so they let us go back in the loft, in the closet, and we found 4 old Vector 2s, and they were already building Vector 3s at the time. We found 4 old Vector 2s. We worked with some of the riggers there, and we rebuilt them. We made them safe, and we had whatever our personal rigs were and our Vector 2s so that we could do back-to-back training,
Sure.
And then soon after, they all this other stuff we're talking about happened, and UPT got on board with us, and we had Vectors. So for 3 or 4 years, we were Vector supported, UPT sponsored, and then very soon after we went to Sunpath. So that's one switch we made. the other is we were Larson and Briscard sponsorees, and I'm still great friends with Stefan and those at L&B. Like we just spent the week with them out at PIA, and anyway, it's back to that small community that we're all a part of, and the rivalry, but not the knockdown, drag out competition, right?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's that's one of the greatest things about, and it's been said, I think, in almost every podcast I've done, is the best thing about skydiving is the community. The majority of the conversations that I have on the podcast are about the people that jump, and very little about the actual jumps, because the cool part's the people.
Yeah.
It really is.
That's kind of life, I think. I really do. I think that's life, right?
Absolutely. Well, it was a very cool thing to discover relatively early in my career, that no matter how I performed as a jumper, as long as I performed well in the community, I had a spot in this amazing sport. And to be a good member of the community, regardless of your status, whether you're up on the podiums or just chucking drogues, you still have a wonderful place in an incredible group of people.
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead. I was just gonna.
Well, I mean, it's kind of ancillary, really, but I've been in DeLand forever, 27 years, and I'm not jumping a lot now since 2019, end of 2019. So a little more than 3 years, very little jumping. I mean, a couple dozen jumps a year or something. And my wife also is not jumping a lot, and she's quite an accomplished leader in our sport. But we love it here because we're always thinking about going somewhere else. And I think what continues to draw us back here is that because it's DeLand, skydivers are constantly coming through from all over the world. And that means without going to the different events, without organizing on the boogie circuit or the coaching circuit, without going to nationals and world championships, we still see everybody.
Yep.
And our house, we do have a big house. And it's actually one of the hardest things about our life, but the best is that we have a 5-year-old daughter, and we spend our summers in Israel, and we got back September 1st last year. We counted the other day. We've had like 10 days in our home as a 3-person family since September 1st. It's been 1 to 5 people living in our home for 6 months. It's absolutely crazy. And we love it. Like often we're sitting at dinner and we go, how many people are here? There's 8 people. And there's 8 nationalities represented by these 8 people.
Isn't that great?
So the exposure that our daughter is getting is phenomenal. I mean, it's one of the greatest values I have for her,
Oh yeah, no, I learned that quite quickly because I learned how and was jumping for work beginning in Las Vegas, and I would go out to Paris Valley all the time. And just going between Vegas and Paris Valley, I met the whole world, I mean, jumpers from absolutely everywhere. And now, almost 29 years later, I don't think there's a country in the world that I can't find a couch to crash on, which it's an amazing thing. It really is. And it's a testament to exactly, how accepting skydivers are. I had Maletsky on the podcast, I want to say about a month ago. And I want to say 4 or 5 days after the interview, I got a message from him going, hey, can I come crash with you? Because my tattoo artist is in Helsinki. And I'm like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Because I had just moved across the world to what I think of as a relatively obscure place. And all of a sudden, I've got Jason Malevsky staying in my spare bedroom.
Yeah, totally.
I love
it, man. I love it. And I have colleagues, who aren't in the sport, like in this new world I'm into. And we travel. I travel in a different way now. And we travel and I'll often, or they'll call, like we're in conversation, and one of them will tell me, oh, I'm going to so-and-so. I'm going to this place next week. And I'm like, really? How long are you there? And they'll tell me, hey, do you want me to set you up with? And it's not a gesture. I'm completely straight with them. Like our community is so tight that I don't even have to know the person I'm setting you up with. Yep. Like I'm willing to connect 2 people who don't know each other, and the person's couch I don't even know. I'm willing to offer that. I mean, that's how tight our community is. It's a bond that goes very, very deep.
And knowing that the person that you don't know that you're asking for a couch is absolutely going to say yes.
Yeah. It's
so nice. It really is. Now, before I forget, I wanted to ask Skydiving Magazine. Tell me about that.
best ever, man. Like, I mean, it was Mike and Sue. Sue was his partner. She was the editor. He did it all. You know, it's his baby. But what do I want to say? I want to say that I was the reporter. I went in as a reporter. I worked there for 4 years. That meant that I wrote 70% of the magazine for 4 years. And what I learned from Mike has carried me to this day. Like in the work that I do now, I do a lot of writing. I write assessment reports for coaching clients or for team clients, and those are based on like interviews, tons of interview data that I collect and type out, and so I write these really meaningful reports for people. And what I learned with Mike that I don't think I would learn in a lot of necessarily like these smaller culture magazines. I learned unbiased, rounded journalism. So like he would just make sure in a very lovingly challenging way to, am I getting all angles of this story? You know,
Sure.
People often say there's two sides to every story. It's not true. There are multiple sides to every story. And so he would really push me to integrate the different perspectives. And that's the unbiased part, is learning how to kind of keep your judgment out, or if you do provide it, you know, you're being clear about this is your judgment in the message. So it's provided value for me for life.
Sure. Well, and I think Laura and Cola with Blue Skies kind of took up the torch when Skydiving Magazine went away.
Yes.
And I was lucky enough to be approached by Cola to write for them. Now, granted, all of my stuff was just opinion pieces, and I'm not sugarcoating it to say that I basically wrote dick and fart jokes for 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, I was the comic relief that was strategically placed at the back of the magazine, kind of like a dirty little secret.
Gotcha.
But I had so much fun doing it, and especially because it was them. Laura and Cola were really outspoken about wanting to not shy away from the edgy stuff and not be the anti-parachutist, but just go places that they couldn't go.
Yes.
You know, parachutists having to be professional and upstanding, and they just wanted to be a bunch of, you know, dirty skydivers.
Yeah.
Which was a lot of fun, you know.
It's funny. It's cool to hear you say that, because now that rings a bell. Now I know you. That adds more. Now I remember a lot of those articles. Yeah, no, so it totally rings a bell.
Yeah, I think I'm still the only person in Blue Skies history as a columnist to get hate mail and awesome. Good and bad mail. So I figured that both of them are successes.
Yeah, right on.
Well, that was kind of what segued into the podcast doing well at all, because when I first started out, again, I'm just some random guy. Nobody knows me from Adam outside of the people that I've worked with, except that I wrote for Blue Skies for 10 years. So my intro to almost every potential guest was, hi, this is Dean. I used to write for Blue Skies Magazine.
Okay.
That's what got the whole thing started. So
yeah, that got you in the door with people.
Yeah. So now you segued from jumping into what you're doing now. Was that a conscious thing, or did it just kind of happen over time?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking. You probably know I had a massive accident in 2010 in Switzerland. To this day, man, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Of course, in the moment, it's horrible. And of course, now I'm 13 years later, I'm really starting to carry the physical trauma. I'm really starting to feel it.
Sure.
And in some ways, I've been in denial a little bit. So I'm just kind of accepting it now and learning to move the right way with it. But in 2013, partially motivated by that, I was just like, in 2013, I was snow skiing, and we went and stayed with Jack Jeffries and Orla, his wife, Sharon and I, my wife. We went and stayed with them for a couple nights, and he was telling me about he went to grad school at American University 15 years earlier and went into this field of organization development, is what it's called. And his focus was high performing leadership teams and the leaders on those teams. And so I started looking at all of his coursework and the stuff he did, and I went back and called the university and interviewed and got accepted. And Jack was, influential in that. And when the books arrived it was you go up there once a month to Washington, D.C. When the books arrived in my mailbox, I opened this box and I started taking all these books, and Dean, I was like, holy shit, this was made for me. This course was written for me. And I had no desire to get a job. Flight one was in full gear. Life was great. I had been hurt, so I wasn't competing and all that stuff anymore. I was just trying to jump more. But I was working with Flight One and things were good. And I just wanted to learn, man. And all this stuff spoke to my heart. It was very people centric. It's about, it's called change management is another word for it. And it's about really bringing the humans back to the workplace, not leading by the bottom line, but taking care of your people. And so I went to school. I graduated in 2015, and then I was just back to skydiving. I mean, nothing changed. And Jack called me at the end of 2018. He said, I'm leaving my practice that I've been with for over a decade. I'm starting my own team. I need a teammate. And I was just like, I just had a baby, 1 year old. I was like, I'm all in. And one thing led to another. I was fast tracked, to be honest with you. Like Jack just drinking water from a fire hose. He mentored me in an accelerated pace to be self-sufficient in the room with the most senior level executives of any corporation in the world. Yeah. And so, I mean, but I'm saying it to you because I know, but like, they're just people, man. Like they're like you and me. I mean, like we all like to say, right? They've got their own problems, their own struggles, their own challenges, their own hopes and dreams, but they're remarkable humans. And what I've learned, the way my story has shifted, is that I've come to realize I had this unconscious judgment, like these elite executives are aloof, better than everyone else. They just have lots of money and that's it, But I've learned that they wouldn't be at the top of these global organizations if they didn't care about their people, and if they weren't people to be admired themselves, So getting to work with these people is just, it's like it's the next phase of life that I never knew was coming.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, it's kind of funny that you say, they're just people when it boils down to it. That lesson was taught to me so graphically through skydiving, especially as a tandem instructor, when you get to see people at their most vulnerable, at that moment when they have no choice but to be exactly who they are. And we all boil down to these core things that human beings are. And it's so wonderful to see people drop their guard and drop the bullshit, even if just for a moment. And I've been privileged enough to see that thousands of times. And so that definitely changed my view of people in the way that I view them wherever they are, whether it's the, Fortune 500 CEO guy, because I know that guy takes his pants off one leg at a time and he has the same problems that I do. Even if he drives a nicer car and lives in a bigger place, he's dealing with the same shit that I am.
Yeah.
To some degree.
Yes, and you interact with them differently too, right? It allows you to drop your guard when you're interacting with them, to not be as intimidated or as put off by who you think they are.
Well, and they appreciate that, right? I mean, nobody wants you to walk in there bowing down to them. They want somebody that's going to talk to them person to person.
Yeah, and then the fun really is just like all humans, we all have our different personalities, and I've done a lot of that studying of that, and so no matter who you are, wherever you are in the status, strata, you still have to break barriers. You still have to get people to open up, to soften up, to ease up in your presence, So that's the fun, just as being two humans and connecting it in the initial phases.
Oh, yeah. That was in all the jumps that I ever did. If you ask me, my favorite part about skydiving became tandem skydives. And my favorite thing about tandems was playing that 30-second psychologist, having to figure out what's going to get this person motivated enough to trust me to step out of an airplane 13,000 feet above the ground.
Yeah, and in 20 minutes.
and it's this wonderful puzzle, and it's so fun. And you can break a lot of people down into certain little boxes, but then every once in a while you get somebody that just does not fit the mold. And it is so much fun to try and figure out, how do I get this person okay with what's happening? And it's so great.
That's cool to hear you say that, because what if you can, maybe we've all even been here where where you encounter that person, and instead of saying, "Oh, this is an awesome challenge, I'm going to figure this out," it's also easy to just kind of quit and go, "Ah, shit, I don't know how to get through this guy."
Sure.
Even complain or just kind of, I'm done with this. But for the most part, if we can lean into it, it's usually going to be better, right?
Oh yeah. Well, and there's always exceptions to the rule, but most of the time I've thought that every time I've seen a refusal for a skydive, it's because the instructor wasn't there for that person. Not always. Some people are just not going to jump, and I get that. But a lot of the times you'll look back and see this person they caught their instructor on a bad day. Their instructor didn't give 100%. They weren't there to reassure. And because of them, that bad vibe rubbed off on the student, and they went, nope, this is not for me. And I've seen it, I mean, I spent enough time sitting up front that I've descended with a fair amount of tandems on my plane going, oh, that's just a bummer.
Where did you do most of your tandems, if you had to guess?
I'd say I did the majority of them, but split between Las Vegas and Cross Keys.
Was no? What's drop zone in Las Vegas was that?
Skydive Las Vegas.
Who ran that at the time?
That was Michael Hawks when I started.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Back in the Vic Papadoto days.
Okay, yeah, nice.
Yeah, so back in I want to say I started doing tandems in '98.
Yeah, so that was like the Sky Surf, the ESPN Sky Surf.
Yeah. This is actually Vic. I took a camera slide at Skydive Las Vegas shortly after Vic passed, and when Vic passed, he was the reigning X Games champ. For Sky Surf. Yeah, so it was back then. But then I'd say the majority of my tandems I did in Cross Keys, and then I slowly from 06 transitioned into flying instead of chuck and drogues.
Cool, man.
Just too damn hard on you.
Yeah, I'm envious of the piloting. I one day we'll get that feather under my belt.
Yeah, man. I got lucky. You know how skydiving is. You get to know people real quick, and by then I had enough years in the sport that you show up at a drop zone and they realize you've got a pilot's license, and it's not too long till you're in the Cessna. And then Ray Farrell, that owns Skydance, put me in the PAC 750, and the rest was history. As soon as you got turpentine in skydiving, you're golden.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, it was good. So tell me about the podcast. How did all that come about?
Well, it's been on hold for 3 or 4 years now, man. So I'm glad you asked, because I would love to make a public statement, but I hate that it's been on hold. Like, the reason it's been on hold, I'm very comfortable with. I just started. I think I did 13 episodes, and Jack called me and offered me what I told you earlier. Said, hey, I need somebody, and I was all in, man. I mean, literally all in, and it became, for 3 years, even 3 or 4 years, it became. I mean, I really value balance in my life, and so I say this, it's all relative, but I just became like a 9-to-5er. I was working hard for 3 years, all knowing that I was trying to build my capabilities so that I wouldn't have to work 9 to 5.
Sure.
But it meant I had to choose to postpone choices, which was my podcast.
Right.
So that's postponed. The good news is, and what I would like to say publicly, is that I have full intention to kick it off again, and I can't even put a date on it yet, because I'm not drinking water from a fire hose anymore, but business is just great, and I need to wait till I have a lull, I need to strategize a little bit of how to integrate it back into this current lifestyle.
Well, I know the podcast was met with a lot of popularity pretty much out the gate. People wanted to hear what you had to say, but what was the motivation behind trying to start it up?
Well, and that's right. That's why I still want to keep it going, right? Is because the motivation is I'm not really able to help my brother directly in many ways, who I mentioned about earlier, and it's not just my brother. He's just the figurehead of so many people, I believe, who are let me say it this way. I believe that we bear the consequences of our choices for a lot longer than we sometimes realize, and big and small. I mean, like, if you study the decisions we make thousands of decisions every day, most of them unconscious, most of them insignificant. They just help us navigate our day. But even those small, insignificant choices can really send ripples into our lives. They become the pattern, they become our identity, who we are, who knows us. And then, of course, the big choices, a lot of those have long-term consequences as well. So I'm back to where you start, what you said earlier, how we were talking about how we're just surrounded by these amazing people. And I mentioned the dinner parties that we have, and that's even when I'm traveling, right? You know how it is. You're on the road in our community. And I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say 2, 3, 4 times a week, I'm with a group of friends who are from all over the world. And we're not talking about we're all over the world. We're friends. Like, we're genuinely friends. And I've always wanted to be a fly on the wall to that. And because I believe that's a big reason that I make the choices I do. And so I just, my life has been this fairy tale. It continues to be that. I'm surrounded by people who I never imagined I would be. And I just want to help. The purpose of the podcast is to help people, especially younger people, be more intentional about the choices that they make.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's I think you're right. You make choices every day without knowing what their effect is going to be. And you don't know that you just made a pivotal choice until you're down the road looking back going, shit, that's where I turned left when I should have turned right. It's everything's 2020 in hindsight, and those teeny little choices can have these enormous effects. They really can.
Yeah, and it like, to take it even a little notch deeper too, with my motivation is, and you help me think of it, is like there's kind of a Western recipe for success. It's like, go to high school, good grades, go to college, graduate, good grades, get a job, get married, house, car, wife, happily ever, house, car, children, happily ever after. And I'm now, especially as I've jumped into this corporate career, I reckon there are many people who follow that recipe and are doing wonderfully. And many of those who are doing wonderfully, if you peel back those layers, man, there's frustration, there's discontentment, there's envy, like just boiling with envy and regret and things like that. And there are certain, like you said, not even exceptions. There are many people who follow that path who aren't living all of that I just described. They have a wonderful life, and it's to be envied itself, right? But
sure.
But I believe there's just a large majority of people who go down that route, and 5 or 10 years in, they are trapped, man.
Sure,
It is almost impossible to get out, because when you're married and you have children, man, they are the first priorities in your life, no matter what you think. Then when that happens, you're going to do everything you can to take care of them and make sure that they're living a good life, So that is the trap.
Well, and I'm sure you've heard the same thing that I have throughout my skydiving career, is you'd have people that were traditionally successful that are telling you how lucky you are.
Yes, that's all the time, right? All the time.
All the time. So you kind of lived this fairy tale life where you've naturally found your way into something that they thought about 365 days a year, 7 days a week, went to sleep daydreaming about, every single day. And you took your own path and got to this path. So now I would imagine for you, it feels much more like a choice instead of this path that you were aimed on. The thing that I've discovered with skydiving is that I've learned how to redefine what I consider success, which is a huge thing. And most people have this cookie cutter version of what they think success in life is, and they never bother to try and define it for themselves. But if you define your own version of success, you're a lot happier than you would be if you're trying to go after someone else's version.
Yeah, totally.
Which is a nice thing.
We constantly compare ourselves, and we don't mean to. We don't want. I mean, we just do it, right? It's a nonstop thing. Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, people are going to compare no matter what. Goodness knows I do it all the time. But I think it's you can compare and you can look at somebody and go, oh, that would be cool. But it's one thing to think someone else is doing well and another thing to wish you were them.
Yeah. And, Dean, this might be a good chance. I didn't even think about this till now, but but because of where I'm currently sitting and the juxtaposition that I'm now looking at skydiving from an outside view and still have one foot in that bucket, it's become. I want to speak to the other side now. I would like to. I don't even know what, like, challenge people or invite people who are full-time skydivers out there, 20 years old, 30 years old, whatever. Keep doing what you're doing, and maybe parallel to that, you can think a little bit more about your future self, because what I'm seeing right now hurts me. It hurts my heart. And because I was very lucky to make this jump to a different track, it hurts me. I'm talking about people who are close to me, and I know you can relate, like who at 40, 45, 50, 60 years old, they still right now, in their perspective, have no choice but to keep throwing drogues, or no choice but to keep canopy coaching, or whatever it might be. And it's not an easy path. It's actually, it gets quite gloomy. It gets quite uninspiring for them to think about, what am I going to do for this last phase of life? How am I going to navigate life? Many of them have family and kids too, so they too are trapped in needing to put food on the table, but realizing that this fulfillment only goes so far. So I don't have the answers to people except to say, if you're 20 and 30 and you're just loving this life, because it is a great one, maybe you can take 5% of your brain space and start strategizing about a future self.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, there's a big difference between the community theater and Hollywood, so to speak. Lots of people can act in community theater, but only a very few make it to Hollywood, and it's the same thing. I mean, just like you said, I've got friends that are still chucking drogues, and I mean, they're fighting physical ailments all the time, much more so than I am. And I wake up sore, and I haven't chucked a drogue in years. So I mean, there's no retirement home for skydivers. You got to make your own way. So that's great advice, especially to the younger jumpers, is eventually the machine you're using to get through this way of life is going to start breaking down, and you're going to want a slightly easier path. Be a fun jumper like Lou Sanborn until you're in your fucking 80s.
Yeah.
But doing the meat hauling and the hard work, man. So,
and I'm saying too, I think what we're saying right now, like, I want it to get through to people's head. Because I'm thinking about, there's a big event happening to land right now, and half the people out there are 20 and 30 years old, and they're freaking good at what they do, man. They're awesome, and they love it, and it's all they care about right now. And I don't want that to change. Even by saying what we've said, I don't want that to ruin their place and time. And I also think that many of them hearing this, just like me at 20 and 30, we hear it, but we don't really hear it, man. It's like, I'll cross that bridge when I get there, So it's almost like I want them to hear. How can you hear it how can you take it seriously without it sinking your ship,
Sure. Well, I think for a lot of people, the first time that I was on the ground for an injury is when you start thinking, oh, it wouldn't really take much to end this career accidentally. So I was lucky in that I had a few minor injuries that made me stop and think, I should probably have a plan B as well. Didn't keep me from going hardcore on plan A, but it just meant that I started to be prepared. For me, that was learning how to fly while I was still jumping my ass off.
Exactly.
Something little. Okay, so as we kind of wrap things up, keeping on the topic that we were just on, a lot of the time I like to ask guests what their advice is to jumpers that are just getting in the sport, thinking about a long future ahead, and people that might be towards the backside of their sport and trying to decide either how to transition out of the sport or how to step back and make it a more casual thing. What advice do you have to them?
For those only listening, I'm shaking my head at the difficult question. I mean, I'll start by saying that, like a lot of us probably, I don't like to give advice because feel like we're all on a different journey, right? So I think of it more as, yeah, I mean, anyway, I think for the new jumper, what I often think about is that there are, to me, as I look back, and there are two critical paths in skydiving. If skydiving, I think you're right, somebody's really loving this and they want to get into it and pursue skydiving. I feel like I was lucky enough to take the competitor path. And nowadays it encompasses more than competition. Now it's organizers and coaches and the boogie circuit, the angle flying popularity that is upon us. There's that path where a jumper fulfills his or her own passions, and through those aspirations and achievements, is able to bring that to the rest of the skydiving world. That's one path. The other big path is more through the instructor path, whether it's AFF, static line, tandems, and through that, like through pursuit of fulfillment in that and getting better and learning and growing, also able to bring that to the skydiving world. I think people can think carefully about those two paths and be intentional about the one they're choosing. And you can do both also. So it's not an either or, it can be a both and. The reason I say it though is that there's a watch out there. I really believe, and no disrespect for people on the instructor path, and I really believe that it's on that path that many more people reach burnout and lose the love of the sport, because it lacks the variety. Quite simple. At the headline level, it lacks the variety, and the variety is in your customers, right? And the variety is in the different crazy and zany things they might do, or the psychology that you shined a light on, which is one wonderful way to keep it variable and to keep it engaging and fulfilling. However, I just think people should think carefully about those two paths, and that'll help them set sail on the right course.
Sure. Now, what about those people that are towards the backside of their career?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know, man. I think one of the things we've already talked about, just parallel to your journey, thinking about future self and maybe building some other non-skydiving capabilities and accomplishments or achievements there, or education and learning, or maybe just carrying it as a lens throughout. And I'm in a place now where I'm kind of retiring. I have retired as a professional skydiver, and I'm also just learning that, like, the hard part for me has been to learn that I can participate. This is going to sound funny, but I want to back it up. I can participate without being the best. And
sure.
What I mean by that is I can have fun. I'm still learning how to enjoy skydiving without feeling like on any given jump or with any given group of people, somehow I have to step in and be the best.
Sure.
And that it's first of all, it's completely unrealistic. It's ridiculous. I do everything I do in jumping now. I'm not even close to one of the best in the groups that I'm in. There's so many things going on, and so I don't really have advice except think about your future self earlier rather than later, and that's in life as much as it is in skydiving, right?
Sure. Well, I remember basically getting a face-to-face graphic representation of that with an ad that was in Parachutist many, many years ago. And you might even remember the ad. It was a picture of a jumper out of Cross Keys named Jason Aubin. And it was the announcement for the season opener of Skydive Cross Keys. And it was him with the most outrageous tan line from goggles from skiing.
Awesome.
And I remember looking at that thinking, A, that's just fantastic marketing. And B, people do stuff other than skydive? Yeah. Holy shit. Nice. Skydivers don't just always jump. And it was just I'll never forget that picture because it said a million things. Hey, skydiving is back, but this guy just spent an entire winter clearly loving the shit out of something that didn't involve, jet fuel and nylon, which I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah, man.
Pretty
Shannon, I'll tell you what, man, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to sit down with me. I'll tell you, I'm gonna be waiting for the podcast to start up again. I think
cool. Thank you.
I think you've got a lot of inspiring stuff that you can aim towards people, and I'm really interested to hear more from you. So honestly, thank you for taking the time this morning.
Thank you, Dean, for reaching out, and it's a pleasure talking with you, man. You got a good mind and a good heart.
I appreciate it. You do too, man. Take care.
Yeah, cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.
And there you have it. Another episode of Lunatic Fringe Into the Void, brought to you as always by, and say it with me, fuck yeah, NZ Aerosports. Head to nzaerosports.com. By Pussfoot. That's right, head to pussfoot.com, the extreme sports collective, and check out everything they've got to offer. By summitparachutesystems.com. Jarrett Martin and the family cranking out amazing pilot rigs, as well as incredible rigging courses. And now joining the Lunatic team, it's the one and only Tony Suits. You know him, you love him. Head to tonysuit.com. Check out all the amazing standards, as well as the new incredible signature line they've got going on. And as for us, the Lunatic Fringe is now on YouTube. That's right, you're going to have the chance to put faces to the audio by heading to youtube.com and looking up the Lunatic Fringe podcast. It's easy. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, check out all the amazing videos from the previous guests that we've had, as well as new and upcoming interviews on video. As always, I am the fucking pilot. Head to thefuckingpilot.net or theprincesspilot.com. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time around.
Damn.